This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who, at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, Special Prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. We have a lot to talk about today. Much has happened in the last week, and you need to know about it, both in our cases and outside of our cases. But we give a special spin. In fact, we give the truth. It's not really spin as to what's been going on there, because I've had 40 years of experience in the swamp of Washington, D.C. You know, I'm from Florida. I know what swamps are all about. I know alligators are out there. In fact, there was a report this week that alligator attacks in Florida are increasing. Well, you know what? They're kind compared to the politicians and lawyers and judges and FBI officials in Washington, D.C. So I know how to deal with them, quite apart from being the son of a meat packer, as we've just said. But this week, I want to talk about the Cliven Bundy case in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm going to talk about the Russia investigation, this so-called collusion, and its intersection with Robert Mueller, the special counsel, so to speak. I'm the real special counsel, but he's the imitation one. And James Comey, the former director of the FBI. And we're going to talk about the new nominee, Wray, who has been nominated to be the FBI director, and get the ramification of that historically. We're going to talk about our NSA case, which is moving forward in discovery, and the fact that there are 147 federal judge vacancies that need to be filled. And we continue to see the effects of the Clinton and Obama era with these left-wing judges making political decisions, violating the law. In fact, President Trump hasn't won one case other than at the Supreme Court, given their political predilections. But let's go back and talk about Bundy a little bit, because in the Bundy trial, the judge, Gloria Navarro, handpicked yes person of Harry Reid. Harry Reid was the corrupt senator from Las Vegas who conspired with his son to take Cliven Bundy's ranch, which his family ranched for over 150 years, away from him and sell it to other interests, such as the Chinese. They orchestrated a raid on that ranch. They beat up his family. They killed his cattle. They threatened their lives. The case ultimately resulted in an indictment of Cliven Bundy and 18 other defendants. And the judge, Gloria Navarro, who rubber stamps everything that the prosecution wants, ordered that the case be tried in 3 parts. And the first part were so-called gunmen. They weren't gunmen. They were people just simply armed as they were allowed to be under their Second Amendment rights when they saw that the Bundy family was being beaten up by these Bureau of Land Management goons, and came to their defense. Well, 4 of these defendants that were tried first, their case ended in a mistrial, a hung jury, and they went back into court this week with Gloria Navarro presiding. And we're going to talk about this later in the show, but I just want to touch on it right now, because this case is very important for all Americans. We have Second Amendment rights. We have First Amendment rights. Go to clivenbundydefensefund.org and read about it, clivenbundydefensefund.org, because this affects your right to defend yourself against a tyrannical government. Of course, this all occurred during the reign of Barack Obama, President Obama. So that, of course, is something that we need to be able to look into and deal with. And these 4 are going back to trial. Cliven is going to be tried after that. We've been defending him in that case. I've been trying to get into the case. Gloria Navarro has kept me out. We're now up at the Supreme Court because there's a Sixth Amendment right to counsel. And she's done all kinds of things that really harm Cliven's rights. And let me just go through a few of them. One of them, she threw him in solitary confinement at the outset of the case. Then she denied him his speedy trial rights under the Sixth Amendment. In other words, a defendant deserves to be tried quickly. Cliven is now in prison for a year and a half. She also allowed certain evidence to come in earlier trials, which are totally improper. Evidence was withheld by the federal government that could help exculpate, that is, get Cliven acquitted and the other defendants. The chief witness of the government was involved in a scandal and, in fact, was found by an inspector general to have extorted money, and she just suppresses that. And there's a litany of whole things, and we now see in this new trial, because I was sitting in last week on the jury selection for this retrial of these four where there was a hung jury, is that she's not even allowing the defense lawyers to strike some of the jurors. They have a right to strike some of them. She's overruling that, and she's packing the jury with the kinds of people that she wants. And that's why we really need your support, because without Cliven standing up for your rights, and here's what the situation was about, is that the federal government claimed that Cliven owed grazing fees. Well, Cliven doesn't have a contract with the federal government. He doesn't owe grazing fees to the federal government. There was a court decision in that regard. Cliven represented himself. That will someday be challenged again. And the government claimed the right to his cattle to pay for the grazing fees. Well, Cliven objected to that, but that doesn't give the government the right to send in these Bureau of Land Management henchmen, these goons, to threaten the lives of his family if they don't roll over, and to beat up his sister, and to tase his two sons, and to violently kick and harm his dog, and to kill the bulls in his herd in particular and bury them in a mass grave to destroy him. It would be the equivalent of saying if you owe the IRS money that they can break into your house and beat the crap out of your family to get the money. Now, that's exactly why we fought the revolution back in 1776. That's what King George was doing to terrorize the colonialists. They were also taking their weapons. And here, of course, we have people that stood up for Cliven when they saw what was happening. They came to his defense and just wanted a peaceful protest to show that this was not right. But they were armed. They didn't harm the hair on anybody. In fact, it was the federal government that harmed Cliven's family. So this case is really important for our rights because you can see even under President Trump, the government is not controlled by President Trump. We have a deep state. We have a government that really broke away from the president of the United States that's trying to destroy him on a day-by-day basis. These people, a lot of them are just simply evil, and they're still being orchestrated by the likes of Clinton and Obama because, frankly, they hate anyone who's conservative. You remember Hillary Clinton saying that we're all deplorables, we're subhuman people in their view, and that's the way they view Cliven. So we have to stand up for him, and we're going into trial soon. It's going to probably occur in about a month and a half after these four are retried, and we need your strong financial support. It's a private defense fund. It's not part of Freedom Watch. And go to clivenbundydefensefund.org. clivenbundydefensefund.org. Please read about the case. Please financially support the case. Cliven, has been left in prison, and his wife and his daughters are running the ranch. They're in financially bad shape, and we need to be able to pay legal fees and such to be able to adequately defend him. And Cliven's not just standing in there for himself. He's standing in there for you, because this could happen to you next, particularly with what we've been seeing as to how this deep state, this Clinton, Obama, Democrat, liberal, leftist, atheist, feminist, all kinds of aspects. I'm not anti-feminist, I'm pro-woman, but these people are radical, and they want to destroy the country. They really think that we are going to harm their interests into the future, and we're not. We're here really for the country and for everybody to live peacefully together. But we need your help here because Cliven is at the front of this entire case. Now, we're also going to talk about the Russia investigation. We saw that a new FBI director was appointed. He was at confirmation hearings earlier in the week. His name is Christopher Wray. He's from Atlanta. And I listened to his testimony, and I'm very disappointed because he would be the FBI director that would succeed Robert Mueller, now the special counsel, James Comey, the very corrupt ex-FBI director. And I listened to him say that Robert Mueller is a man of integrity. Basically, he just looks like he's a yes man. He rolled over. And that's the last thing we need at the FBI, because after all these years of corruption at the FBI, and I've talked about that in previous shows, we need somebody who's strong. We need somebody who has courage, somebody who can stand up to the politicians. And this guy looked like a little bird who was just ready to roll over to anyone who asked him a question. And I'm very concerned, and I hope that he will come through and, develop the courage to stand up to this swamp of alligators in Washington, D.C. And then I want to say that our case against Comey and the NSA and the CIA and the DIA, Director of National Intelligence, and Obama, we served him this week personally. He got a complaint. One of his representatives finally accepted it after the process server had to go through all kinds of things. Obama doesn't respect the law. He thinks he's above it in his $8 million mansion over there in Colorado, Washington. This case is moving forward. We've asked for expedited discovery to take the deposition, that is oral testimony, of James Comey, of Clapper, who was Director of National Intelligence, and John Brennan, that very corrupt CIA director. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more later in the show. And of course, there are 147 judges out there that still need to be picked. And we're playing a role with our judicial selection strike force. If we're going to dilute the number of Clinton and Obama appointees who are making all of these illegal decisions, we need better judges on the bench. And I hope that you'll go to freedomwatchusa.org and see what we're doing there, and also support our cause, because, frankly, we are the mouse that roared. We need your assistance. That's freedomwatchusa.org. Please keep up to date. Sign up for our free publications. Get our YouTubes. See what we're doing. I'm the only lawyer who ever got a court of law to rule that a president of the United States committed a crime. That occurred with Bill Clinton. I am the special counsel, even though I call myself that. It's true that I am. And we need your strong support. So go to freedomwatchusa.org and go to clivenbundydefensefund.org and contribute to our causes. We'll be right back.
Fearless.
He's Klayman, he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
You don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I want to go back and talk about the Bundy case and the role of Attorney General Jeff Sessions in this case, which thus far is kind of troubling. I'd say about 4 months ago, when the Attorney General was finally confirmed, I contacted him. I actually called him on his cell phone and at his home phone and said that I needed to talk with him about the Bundy case. And he was gracious. He called back, and I had a private conversation with him on a Sunday. And he told me that once his team was in place, his deputy, of course, is Rod Rosenstein, that he would review that case. I didn't tell him how to come out. I know he's a man of integrity, so I didn't try to color his thinking. But over the course of time, I sent to him a variety of materials about how this particular judge, Gloria Navarro, was basically perverting the law, how she was doing the bidding of former Senator Harry Reid and Barack Obama. And, of course, Harry Reid had called Cliven and his family domestic terrorists, trying to prejudice not just the judge, but also the jury on how they ultimately would rule in Cliven's case. So I sent him a variety of materials. I even sent him a video showing how Cliven's sister Margaret was thrown to the ground and attacked, how his 2 sons were tased, how his dog was kicked, how cattle were killed, and that kind of thing. And I expected to hear back from him. But I didn't hear back from him. So I started to inquire with his scheduler, someone by the name of Erica O'Brien, to set up a meeting. And she said she would set up a meeting with the Attorney General. And the Attorney General had told me that if he had a meeting, he'd have to have the prosecutors as well. I said, that's fine. But we need to get to the bottom of it. In fact, President Trump has been supportive of Cliven Bundy and the ranchers, the way they've been treated. It's not just Cliven, but almost 100 ranchers in and around that area have been driven out of business by the Bureau of Land Management under Obama, by ridiculous environmental regulations and rulings with regard to preserving the desert tortoise, who actually like the cattle. They eat the manure of the cattle. I mean, this is all pretext to drive the ranchers off the land. And, of course, last but not least, as Obama left office on January 20th, 2017, he nationalized Cliven's ranch, called it the Butte National Monument. I mean, it's unbelievable that property rights, and that's why we fought the revolution, could be removed in that way by the federal government. So I've been trying to lobby, in effect, Attorney General Sessions to review the case. And a couple of weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C., because I hadn't heard anything from the scheduler, Eric O'Brien. So I went up to the Justice Department. I'm an alumnus. They have me in their system. I'm not a threat to them. And they wouldn't even let me in. But I did call up to Eric Howell. I said, I want to come up and meet and set up a meeting with the Attorney General. And instead of that, I was told that a letter would be sent. It was ultimately sent. And it said that the Attorney General had sent all of my materials to the U.S. Attorney in Nevada. Well, that U.S. Attorney has engaged in a lot of prosecutorial misconduct. We'll get into that later in the show. But that's ridiculous. That's like sending the stuff into the devil's lair. And then they said, well, you can continue to communicate with the Attorney General's office, but if you have anything to say it to the prosecutors. Well, they're the ones that are the problem, along with the judge. Now, this week, Attorney General Sessions traveled to Las Vegas, Nevada, to do a press conference about sanctuary cities. Of course, he's against them. I'm against them, too. And he went to the U.S. Attorney's office. So I then sent an email to Eric O'Brien. I said, I'd like to meet with the Attorney General for 15 minutes, because I was there as well. I was meeting with Cliven Bundy at the time. And I got back a very disingenuous response saying, well, thank you for the invitation, but the Attorney General doesn't have time. Well, it turns out a day later, the Attorney General Sessions made a statement supportive of the prosecutors, lauding the prosecutors, and at the same time saying that he wasn't taking sides, completely contradictory. I have a lot of respect for Attorney General Sessions, but, he's got to get tough here. I know he's under siege. I know they're trying to destroy him, but he's got to put his head down just like President Trump and do what's right. And to be complimenting this prosecutor, who's frankly an Obama-Clinton type that's been left in place, he's simply there temporarily, but there's rumors that he's going to be reappointed. His name is Steve Murray. Is wrong. Is that this Attorney General should be reviewing the case and determining whether this prosecution should proceed or not, rather than playing both sides, talking out of both sides of his mouth. So I want to keep a good relationship with the Attorney General, but this is not the way to lead the Department of Justice. I am an alumnus of the Department of Justice. I left because I saw this kind of thing when I was working as a trial lawyer there. I started Judicial Watch to be the People's Justice Department, and I was hopeful that when Attorney General Jeff Sessions became the Attorney General, that he would restore the integrity of the Department of Justice. It has not been restored so far. I hope that he will. I hold out my hand of friendship to him. I don't ask him to come out one way or the other, but he's got to review this case. He's got to do his job, and frankly, he's got to man up and not play both sides of the fence. We'll be right back.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I want to talk now about something that we've been working on for a very long time. It's extremely important for our national security. It's important for the families of our fallen heroes. As we go into confrontations more in the Middle East with North Korea, Iran, of course, is going to be coming back with their nuclear weapons, as well as North Korea as a threat to us. The military is extremely important. Our country's in great peril. And 3 months after the death of Osama bin Laden, there was a tragedy in Afghanistan. It was a mission called Extortion 17, the biggest loss of life in the Afghan war. I've got on the line 2 of the parents of fallen heroes, Michael Strange and Patrick Hamburger. But let me give you a little introduction about what happened, because we've been trying to get the truth as to what happened in this loss of life, because we had 30 servicemen, 22 special ops, SEAL Team 6, National Guard, others, real American heroes, loaded onto a Chinook helicopter and sent into the Tangi Valley to take out some terrorists. Now, what happened? This helicopter, which was relatively slow, 1962 vintage, went into battle. There was a crash report because it ultimately was shot down by the Taliban. And in that crash report, they said there were no eyes in the sky. They said that when the crash occurred, the black box went missing. We know the rules of engagement under President Obama is that you had to be shot first by a Muslim terrorist before you could even shoot back. And there were all kinds of unexplained answers here. 7 Afghan commandos who were on that mission were substituted out at the last minute, and 7 were substituted in. We still don't even know who they are. So all of that's bad. But then to add insult to injury, and that's the mild way of putting it, when the bodies were brought back to Dover Air Force Base, where the Armed Forces Institute of Pathology is, a prayer was given at the ramp ceremony in Afghanistan by a Muslim cleric damning our family sons to hell as infidels. I mean, unbelievable. This could have only occurred under President Obama, that kind of thing would occur. But it's an outrage to the military. It's an outrage to the families. And one of the families on the phone right now, the Strange family, their son, was cremated without permission. I mean, why was that? So we've been pursuing answers. And my staff and I went to the Government Oversight and Reform Committee. It was then being run by Darrell Issa, the chairman, and he assigned an investigation to Jason Chaffetz, who was a chairman of a subcommittee dealing with these issues. And we spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money trying to educate the committee, getting them to do their job to find out what happened, because there never have been adequate answers to that. And when it came time to have the hearing, Jason Chaffetz, who was the chairman at the time, simply had 3 people show up that could confirm how the bodies were, buried in effect, and then one character, a political hack from the Department of Defense by the name of Gary Reed, an Obama appointee, basically saying that bad things happen. Obama happens in effect. Sorry, this happened and we can't explain it. And the only congressman that raised an issue with that was Congressman Micah from Florida. Said, why do we have these people here? They don't have any answers. They don't know anything. They're obviously sent because they know nothing. And Chaffetz really didn't respond to that. He cried a few crocodile tears at the end. He's a real actor. He came over to the families and at the end, and I asked him, I said, are we going to have a continuing investigation? And he just walked off. Now, what we've learned since then is that there was someone who actually knew in large part what happened. And she's inactive at this point Air Force targeter by the name of Joni Marquez. There were eyes in the sky. She and her pilot saw what was going on. She told command to call off the mission because the helicopter was hovering for about 13 minutes over what became the crash site. A RPG hit the copter and took it down. And she saw a body fall out of the copter that was writhing on the ground, still alive, and no one came to try to rescue him. And that was likely the son of Charlie Strange, who you're going to hear from in a few minutes. And consequently, the cover-up was blown by Joni Marquez. She's a very brave lady, and she came forward. She's an Air Force lieutenant, and she's got PSD. I mean, she's very harmed by this whole thing because she kept it inside of herself for all these years. And you can see the video of this at our website at freedomwatchusa.org. The story was broken by Circa News, Sarah Carter and John Solomon. And we now have the beginning of understanding what went on. Now, what's really important is that Joni Marquez told me that after this hearing, she contacted Jason Chaffetz and left messages for him to call her because she had answers to what happened. And, of course, he never did. Now, we went ahead after that and we filed complaints, a House ethics complaint against Jason Chaffetz for covering this up, which he clearly did. And we filed a complaint generally with the Inspector General of the Department of Defense. And they are conducting an investigation as to what goes on. Now, Inspector Generals are generally independent. We may get some truth out of this. And now that Trump is in charge of the Department of Defense, it's less likely that everything will be covered up. Trump is very pro-military. I believe that he'll be supportive of us if our beleaguered president ever gets out of the so-called Russian issue, where the left is trying to destroy him, and Obama and Clinton, helping left-wing interests, are trying to destroy him, and the media is trying to destroy him, the mainstream media. But this is very important, and it's crucial to our national security that when our servicemen go into battle, that they know that they're backed up by their government, that their government's not going to sell them out, that their government's not going to cover things up, that their government's not going to let families literally be tormented in pain because they can't even get answers as to what happened. It's a disgrace. And I'm going to ask Charlie Strange right now to explain, and then we'll have Doug Hamburger, both real heroes. They're the parents of Michael Strange and Patrick Hamburger, who were on that flight. Explain, what they've gone through in trying to get answers from the government, and how they're hopeful that this Inspector General's investigation will give them those answers and bring whoever was responsible to justice one way or the other. The question remains, were our servicemen sold out to the Taliban by either the Afghans, and in fact we have lawsuits pending in that regard. Hamid Karzai, of course, was the president of Afghanistan at the time, or was there somebody inside of our military who gave up these brave servicemen 3 months after bin Laden was killed as an offering to the Taliban in exchange for cash or whatever? We don't know. Bad things do happen. People are not always honest in this world. We've seen that. So, Charlie, give us a little bit of a background in a couple minutes as to your son, Michael, and then I'll ask Doug to do the same thing, and then we'll come back to you on the broader issues involved here. But tell us who Michael was.
Great job, Larry. Thank you so much. Can't thank you enough. Michael's from Philadelphia, North Catholic High School. He was involved with the bin Laden raid, and he came home after that, and he was different. And he grabbed me by the bicep. He said, "Dad, you won't believe what's going on in this country." And 94 days later, Extortion 17, like you said, the biggest loss of life in the two wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, and also the biggest loss of life in the history of America, 22 men from Navy Special Ops. And there was a lot of questions, and, why 38 men in one helicopter, and you were there for us, and Doug with his, asking his questions, and there's so many unanswered questions. They told us it was a lucky shot from 200 yards in the pitch dark by an RPG. They told me my son was burnt to death because the RPG blew the helicopter up at once when it hit it. Once when it hit the ground because of the fuselage. So they told us he was already cremated. 4 months
well, now you know,
later,
Charlie, that he was probably the one that was on the ground that could have been saved. But no one came to his aid, even though Joni Marquez and her pilot was telling them, we need some reinforcements here and we need to pull out.
Last 15 minutes, Michael was thrown out of the helicopter, jumped out of the helicopter. He wasn't burned at all. We have the pictures. You've seen the pictures. Jason, I'm trying not to curse, from Utah, seen the pictures of Michael. He wasn't burned at all. It looks like he had a gun in his hand. So my son was there alive for 15 minutes and couldn't do nothing. And this Joni Marquez, God bless her soul, she requested fire on the Taliban and got denied 8 times because of the rules of engagement under Obama. She said, "Don't send Extortion 17. We didn't need them." Yeah. And the newest news, Larry, is some of the Rangers that were 4 miles away have contacted me, and they said the same thing. They were getting ready to get picked up to leave. They were ready to exfil.
No, it's an outrage, and we're investigating it now with the Inspector General. I want to turn this over to Doug. Tell us about Patrick. He was a brave hero, too. And Patrick's been there, in our hearts, as well as Michael. And we need justice, but we also need to get answers because we need to protect our servicemen in the future. Doug, tell us about Patrick.
Patrick was our oldest son, and he lived most of his life in Lincoln, Nebraska. And he really loved doing what he did for the military. In fact, he had me sign papers to let him join the Nebraska Army National Guard when he was 17 years of age, between his junior and senior year in high school. And upon graduating from high school, he went ahead and went to boot camp and came back to Nebraska after boot camp and worked first in the motor pool and then found a passion for working on helicopters. Pat first started to work with Apaches and Blackhawks and truly fell in love with working on Chinooks. And Pat rose in the ranks to where he was a sergeant in the Nebraska Army National Guard Aviation Support Unit out of Grand Island, Nebraska. And at any rate, Pat had his own flight crew, and he was responsible for making sure that his Chinook was in top operating order, that his crew knew what they were doing. They would fly rescue missions over the Rocky Mountains. They'd help put out the forest fires in California. And for 3 years before they went to Afghanistan, they trained on night vision flying so that they would be able to work with special forces once they got deployed. So they had 3 years of experience as far as getting there and being trained. On top of being a great soldier and son, Pat also has a daughter. Her name is Peyton, and Peyton was 2 when Pat and the guys were killed, and now she's 8 years of age. One of the things that Pat really stressed to me was that with all of his training, that safety was the number one thing that they were taught. That whenever they went into mission, they would never be out there on their own. There would always be a stack of aircraft up above them, helping to protect them with shooting support. They would be there to help target and find the enemy, and that their number one job was to make sure that that Chinook got in and out of battle safely and that everybody on board would be safe. And as we know from the government's investigation into that, that did not happen at all that night. And that's one of the big questions we have, is for all those years of training and all of these rules of engagement that our military has, why did that all fall apart that night? Why didn't they have any support, so to say? And then, of course, when Joni came forward and said, well, that's not all true, we did have a C-130 above. We did try to call off that mission several times. And in fact, going on that mission, they had 2 different spots that they were supposed to land. They had a primary and then a secondary. Both of them were a mess. Both of them, they were not able to land that aircraft. And instead of Central Command coming forward and calling off the mission or finding them a safe landing zone, they asked the crew on the C-130 to find a place for that Chinook to land. And that's one of the reasons that Chinook sat up in the air so long. Definitely that's not the type of instructions you should be giving a pilot and a targeter on a C-130, is to find them a safe place to land. They should have called
Absolutely.
off
We have about 20 seconds left, and I just want to say I want to thank both of you and your families, and we have another client also, Sid Dugandara, who lost his son. And if we don't protect the integrity of our military, if we don't stand there for our fighting troops, how do we expect them to go into battle in the future? And that's why this is so important. So go to freedomwatchusa.org. We had a press conference a while ago. Take a look at that. We'll be right back.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I want to talk now about the state of our nation. It's not in good shape. You know, when you have a government that is so corrupt, that covers things up, that the deep state trying to destroy the president, not letting him do his job, the American people, you know, are watching cable news all the time. They see CNN, which I now call the communist news network. They see MSNBC. They used to have an expression, lean forward. I used to say it was more like bend over, frankly. And you see the Washington Post, the New York Times, Daily Beast, Huffington Post running interference, trying to get the left to control this country, to take control, to socialize us, to put us under total government control. That's what they want in the end. You get very depressed. But you know what? There's no reason to be depressed, because we rose up in 1776. We can do it again. I want to avoid a violent revolution, although it may ultimately come to that. I won't advocate that. But I'll tell you something, the way things have been going, as we saw what happened in Alexandria a few weeks ago, there could very well be an explosion. It's time for everyone, whether it's Attorney General Jeff Sessions, whether it's other people in other departments, whether it's judges, whether it's lawyers, whether it's private citizens, really to rise up and to use the tools that our founding fathers gave to us under our Constitution to take strong legal action, to demand results, to not be afraid. I've never been afraid. I can't be afraid. Number one, I'm very religious, and I believe, even though I may not always get things right, that this is what the Father and the Son want me to do. In fact, I've had personal experiences communicating with Jesus from time to time. I really have. And he told me, Larry, go ahead, do what you have to do. I'm with you. I'm behind you. I'm there. And I hope that everybody, whatever your religion, understands that we're here with God's grace and that we're here to do what needs to be done. But our country is hanging by a thread. And that's why this Cliven Bundy case is so important, because he stood up to the government. He did what our founding fathers did. He has a legitimate claim that the federal government doesn't own the land, that he doesn't owe grazing fees. But that doesn't give the government the right, the federal government, this was under Obama, to bust into your house, in effect, and terrorize your family, steal your property. In this case, they killed it, the cattle, and to threaten your lives of your loved ones. And that's why we have a Second Amendment. That's why we have a right to bear arms. And Cliven and the people that came forward to protest, Cliven wasn't armed and his family wasn't armed, but those people were. And they came because they believed in the principles of the founding fathers. And now they're being prosecuted, I would say politically persecuted, by a court that is very political, that's made a number of prejudicial rulings. I want you to go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. Contribute to the defense fund and read about what went on in this case, because it can happen to you next. And Cliven has told me he doesn't want to settle this case. He's going to risk it all because he believes in the Constitution. You know, it's interesting. Cliven is a Mormon, and in the Mormon religion, the Constitution is the equivalent of the Book of Mormon. It's incorporated into it. And he believes that our founding fathers' principles are sacrosanct. And Mormons believe that this is the promised land, even before Israel, the United States. And you've got to admire that kind of thinking, because this is a country which is built upon people like Cliven, and we need to support him. And we need to fight what's going on in that court, and we need to get him acquitted. He's going to be going to trial in about a month and a half. Now, I'm still fighting to get into the case. He doesn't even have an adequate defense team at this point, because the Sixth Amendment right to counsel has been denied by leftist judges who hate Cliven. And they don't like me either, for that matter. But you need a strong lawyer to stand up to what is right. You can't always just roll over to a judge that wants to put Cliven away for life by manipulating the jury. And just this week, you know, she didn't allow these 4 defendants that are being retried to strike jurors. She took it upon herself to insert jurors into this process. That's totally illegal. And then you have a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is a rubber stamp, except for one courageous judge by the name of Ronald Gould. You know what? And he's a liberal, and there are good liberals out there, but most of them are very politicized. Please go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. All of our freedoms are at stake, and this is going back to our Revolutionary War. This is what we did with King George III. So go to ClivenBundyDefenseFund.org. Please contribute to our cause and keep abreast of what's going on. God bless you. God save America. See you next week.